There's an entity in your Minecraft world. This entity has taken your house, kidnapped your dog, and scared you half to death. You have every right to be angry with it. But what if it's done all this, not because it wants to kill you, but because it wants to be your friend? Hello everyone, my name is Indomitable Sloth, and this is the story of OmenMinecraft, a YouTube channel telling a tale of fear, hunger, and friendship. The first video on the channel is named Where It Started. Our main character, OmenMinecraft, creates a new world titled Survival World 1 and begins talking to us in the chat window. I'm playing on the survival world and going to upload this to YouTube. I have a few more weeks of school left until summer break. I plan on doing a lot with this world, so if you're watching, please subscribe and like the video. The video cuts to Omen making a dirt pillar to mark the location of his new house. When Omen reaches the top of the pillar, he looks around, and when he does, we can see something that looks just a bit strange in the corner of his vision, although he doesn't notice it. What could it be? Descending from his tower, Omen ventures into a nearby cave system to look for ore. Upon returning from this expedition, however, Omen finds dozens of one-by-one pits outside his house. Omen is confused by these pits, but he doesn't have time to inspect them longer, because just as he enters his house, he hears a loud roar outside. He gets kicked from the world, and the video ends. The description of the video is a message from Omen, telling us that he's looked through the Minecraft forums, but hasn't found anything about this error. It certainly doesn't fit the standard Herobrine motif of tunnels, trees, and redstone torches, but it's also not something you'd expect to see in normal Minecraft. Is this just a glitch, or is there something wrong with Omen's world? Video 2 is titled forgreg.mp4. Between the last video and this one, Omen has covered all of the pits with cobblestone and a sign with a question mark. Omen tells us, "I don't understand what's happening. I've tried searching this stuff up, but nothing is answering my questions. Is this normal? I didn't dig these pits." Omen goes into a cave and finds more pits. Seeing water in one of the pits, he decides to explore deeper. At the bottom, he's surprised to see a large 3x3 block tunnel with leather, feathers, and rotten flesh scattered across it. Some commenters claimed to see a monster walking past, but I couldn't make it out in the darkness. Either way, we might get a closer look at the entity later in the series. For now, let's keep the tunnel and the mob drops in the back of our mind for later. The third video, Just a Chat, takes us out of the survival world and into a special world that Omen uses to talk to his friend Greg. Omen called Greg into the world to accuse him of installing a mod onto his computer, which would explain the strange entity and what has been happening in Omen's world. Greg, however, firmly denies installing anything on Omen's computer and suggests that it might just be a creeper. Finally, Greg's mom calls him to dinner and the video ends. So far, we've seen the world start to interact with Omen, but when Omen starts actively exploring the world, he might not like what he finds. Video 4, I Know There's More. Omen starts the video by writing with a book and quill, "I know I'm not crazy, I will find out who you are, but for now, you are Debase." The video cuts to Omen walking through a desert biome with his pet dog, where he stumbles upon a glass pillar extending into the sky. He follows the pillar downwards and finds that it leads into the portal room of a stronghold. Omen explores the stronghold, which is surprisingly mob-free, but suddenly he hears the sound of a clucking chicken. The video cuts again to Omen on the surface of the overworld, presumably returning to his house, but before he does, he suddenly realizes that his dog is missing. Although he climbs a tree to look for it, he cannot find it. Returning to his house, Omen finds that the pits are now topped with glass, although he doesn't seem too surprised by this. Omen writes in his book, "Rest in peace, my dog, don't even know where he went." Entering his house, he finds that there is a massive 2x2 hole in the middle of the floor. As he peers down into the hole, a deep roar echoes up from the depths and Omen is kicked from the world. In the 5th video, Curiosity Killed the Cat, Omen starts by saying goodbye to his old house, before moving to a taiga biome to start a new one. Omen seems to think that he's being watched as he keeps looking in the direction of his old house. He writes in his journal, "There's this itching feeling that I can't seem to let go of. Fear usually gets the best of me, but I might let curiosity win this time. Why does it have to be in my house?" After writing this, Omen plucks up his courage and returns to his first house to reclaim it for his own, blocking off the hole with granite and putting some food in the furnaces to smelt. He places some torches outside, but when he gets back, the hole is open again and the food in the furnaces is gone. Apparently steeled with resolve, Omen jumps into the hole and the video ends. This was a bad idea, because in the 6th video, I Regret Everything, Omen respawns in the Debase rooms at the floor of the world. Omen starts freaking out, writing, "Where am I? I'm starting to get really scared." He starts finding leather, string, feathers, and rotten flesh throughout the tunnels. A bubbling sound can be heard in the background, and then... Bam! Jump scare. Omen freaks out and blocks himself off, and the video ends. Let's look at that jump scare closely, shall we? We finally have a clear image of Debase, up close and personal. It seems to be a mutated Steve, with a recognizable facial structure and the iconic shirt and pants, although it also has a protruding jaw and monstrous arms and legs. I find it interesting that Debase looks very similar to Steve. Let's file this with the other information we have about Debase. Video 7, The Truth, begins with Omen confronting his friend Greg about Debase. Omen says that if Greg won't fess up to installing something on his computer, then Greg shouldn't come to his house to play anymore. Greg protests his innocence and leaves the server. Omen starts a new world, saying that he's going to prove that Greg is lying. This isn't explained very well in the original video, but Omen's idea is that if he can replicate Debase in a new world, that will prove that Greg downloaded a mod onto his computer. Thus, Omen recreates his house, the food in the furnaces, and the dirt pillar next to the house. Although Omen initially thinks it worked because no mobs spawn immediately, when he returns to the makeshift house after a night of waiting, he finds that there's no pit and no missing food. The 8th video is named The Hunt for Debase. Omen is back in his survival world with the goal of making a trap for Debase. Having crafted some redstone repeaters and sticky pistons, and collected redstone for wiring, he makes a simple pit trap and leaves some steak as bait. After waiting for a couple minutes, he hears the pistons activate and goes to check the trap, but he finds that Debase has dug a hole down to bedrock to escape it. He hears a roar from the depths and the video ends. At this point, Omen is no longer afraid of Debase. Now he's furious. And when fear leads to anger, that road only leads to suffering. Video 10 is titled, What's Wrong with My Tunnel? Back in his survival world, Omen writes in his journal, "They say there's light at the end of every tunnel, so what's wrong with my tunnel?" Omen returns to his taiga home to find that it has been destroyed, so with no option left he goes back to his original house. Out of food and out of patience, he starts filling the pit with TNT and shouts that he hates the monster, that it took everything from him. But just as he's about to light the TNT, he hears the sound of a door behind him, and he finds a couple pieces of steak outside. The text flashes on the screen, "Maybe I just haven't reached the end of my tunnel yet." The next video is titled Sorry, and fittingly, the first thing Omen does is apologize to Greg for accusing him without any evidence. They talk for a bit about the situation, and then Greg drops this deep line. I used to be scared of a lot of things, but then I realized that you're not the only one scared sometimes. That's such a great quote. Let's see if Omen takes it to heart. The final video on Omen's channel is just named Debase, and it's a touching end to the series. Omen writes in his book, "I was wrong, and I realize it now." He throws the book into the pit, and as he does, his dog responds in his house. Omen opens a notepad window to type, "Rest easy, Debase," and a message pops up in the chat window from Debase itself. "Thank you." Omen closes Minecraft and deletes the world, and the video ends. To continue, let's summarize the information we know about the characters in the series. First, we have Omen, the protagonist of the series. Omen seems about middle school age because he talks about being in school, and because his reactions are more emotional than I would expect from older players. These emotions cause him to overreact and cause problems for himself later on. His fear of the monster makes him instantly turn on Greg in just a chat, blaming him for installing a virus on his computer. His fear further isolates him from Greg in the truth when Omen says he and Greg can't be friends anymore. Finally, Omen's fear drives him to rage in What's Wrong with My Tunnel and almost makes him drop TNT into the pit in his house. Despite his fear, Omen is also very curious about the entity in his world. He first looked on the Minecraft forums to research his problem, but when he didn't find any answers on the forums, he ran a series of experiments to try to understand the entity and its behavior. He left food in his furnaces in curiosity, food that had disappeared by the time he returned. In the truth, Omen tried to rebuild his house to see if Debase would appear in the new world as well. Finally, Omen tried to capture Debase in the hunt, presumably to study it further. In addition to Omen, we have his friend Greg. Greg is probably Omen's friend from school, because he often comes over to Greg's house after school so they can play together. Greg is wise beyond his years, as he gives Omen the advice that Debase might be just as scared as Omen is. We also know that Greg is forgiving as he accepts Omen's apology right away. Even though we don't know much else about Greg, his role as Omen's mentor is integral in bringing about a happy conclusion to the story. Finally, we have Debase, the entity in the world. It has 3 calling cards, 3 signatures hinting at its presence in the world. First, we've seen it doing a lot of digging and tunneling, from the 1x1 pits outside Omen's house, and the 2x2 pit inside it, to the long tunnels and labyrinths in For Greg and Regret. Additionally, it also has an affinity for glass pillars, which we see leading to the end portal and covering the 1x1 pits in I Know There's More. Finally, whenever there is food, Debase will be sure to consume it. We know this from the video Curiosity because it ate the food in Omen's furnaces, but we can also determine its hunger by what it leaves behind. When we're in Debase's tunnels, we see leather but no beef, feathers but no chicken. The food has been eaten, and whatever is inedible is left behind. Visually, Debase looks very similar to a Minecraft Steve, as I mentioned before. This could mean one of 2 things. Either Debase used to be a Minecraft Steve and morphed into a monstrous form due to the constraints of hunger, or Debase was always a monster and stole a Steve's skin to use it as camouflage. I'm inclined to believe the former theory because of my last point. Debase is capable of human emotions like kindness and gratitude. Even though Omen has tried to capture and destroy it, Debase is still kind enough to leave Omen food at the end of the tunnel video. In addition, for a brief moment, we can see that Debase said thank you to Omen before the world was deleted. Just as Greg said, Omen and Debase were just scared of each other. It's theorization time, but before getting to my own theories, I want to acknowledge that I'm not the first reviewer to cover the Omen Concrete channel. The English YouTuber Render published a video on June 17, 2024, and the Spanish YouTuber Bobbycraft released a Spanish video on July 1st. Both of these videos have over 2 million views, and it was through Render's video that I found Omen's story, so I would be remiss if I didn't talk about their contributions to our understanding of the lore. Render suggests that the 9th video, Sorry, where Omen apologizes to Greg, should come after the 10th video, What's Wrong with My Tunnel, the one with the TNT. Omen is still angry with Debase at the beginning of Tunnel, and it would make sense for Debase's apology to Omen at the end of Tunnel to spark Omen's apology to Greg in Sorry. The video Sorry and the lesson about mutual fear that it tells would be an excellent stand-in for the light at the end of Omen's Tunnel. However, the Tunnel video was published 9 days after Sorry, so if the other videos on the channel were published in order, it would be inconsistent to move them around like this. My opinion of this theory is that Sorry does fit thematically better if it occurs after Tunnel, and I used that ordering in my exploration section earlier. Now let's look at the other reviewer's perspective. Bobbycraft's unique theory is that Omen was the one who made the glass pillar at the end portal and over the holes. He states that the glass pillar marking the portal's location and the Eyes of Ender locating the structure could not have existed in the same update at the same time. The pillar only existed in Java Beta 1.9 pre-release 3, while Eyes of Ender only located strongholds afterwards, after Java's full release 1.0.0. Thus, Bobbycraft concludes that this could only have happened if Omen had made the pillar. Building off this theory, Bobbycraft states that Omen would have been the one to cover the 1x1 pits with glass as a way to see down into them. In my opinion, I think the pits part of the theory is correct, but that the pillar part is incorrect. Let's start with the glass covering the pits. We only ever see Debase breaking blocks, making the pits by Omen's first house and destroying Omen's second house. It would be thematically inconsistent for Debase to place those blocks, but it would make sense for Omen to have placed them. But what about the glass pillar by the end portal? I believe I have an answer to this riddle, a theory that blows the whole story open and answers the question of why does Debase exist. Let's review our information. As I've already mentioned, we know that Debase has Steve-like qualities. Debase looks like a Steve with the iconic hairline, shirt, and pants. Debase also exhibits the exclusively human emotions of empathy and gratitude. In addition, we know from the video Curiosity that Debase has access to furnaces and chests. We know this because the food inside went missing even though the furnaces and the chests weren't broken. This ability is something that normal mobs don't have, but that a Steve can do very easily. Now we have the question of the glass pillar at the end portal. We know Debase didn't build it because, as I mentioned before, Debase is exclusively a destructive creature. That only leaves Omen, right? Well, I don't think Omen built the pillar either. For one thing, it would be strange for Omen to have used glass for a pillar, when he's been perfectly happy using dirt for the pillars by his houses. In addition, for Omen to have found the end portal, he would have needed Eyes of Ender. Eyes of Ender have two components, Ender Pearls and Blaze Powder. We never see any Endermen in the series. In fact, it's implied that there aren't any Endermen because there are no other hostile mobs. In addition, we have no indication that Omen ever built a nether portal. Omen couldn't have made the pillar because he couldn't have found the stronghold, and neither could Debase. That means the pillar must be naturally generated. Finally, if we look at the end portal, we can see that all of the Eyes of Ender have been placed, but the portal is not active. That means the Eyes of Ender must have been placed before the end existed. The implication of this is very significant. The world that Omen created was actually generated in Beta 1.9, 4 years before the series is supposed to take place. I'm not familiar enough with the terrain generation of each version of Minecraft, so I don't know whether the terrain is consistent with Beta 1.9, but I do think that this is the inference the creator wants us to make. So what does this implication have on the nature of Debase? Well, if the world was created 4 years ago, doesn't that mean something created that world 4 years ago? Something that has spent the last 4 years trapped in this world? What if Debase isn't just a monster, but a forgotten player, warped by time and hunger? Over the last 4 years, Debase has adapted to its underground environment, developing dark skin to match the darkness of its surroundings, but also retaining some of the Steve skin to remind itself of its humanity. The very name Debase, given to the entity by Omen, hints at the nature of the creature, that it is something that was decreased in quality. It thanks Omen then for deleting its world, because hopefully this action will let it rest in peace. What do you think of my theory? Am I on the right track, or am I completely losing it? Let me know down in the comments below. Also, if you're enjoying the video so far, leave a like and subscribe for future ARG Analysis videos. I really appreciate your support. Finally, I'd like to move on to the analysis portion of the video, where I use this project as a case study for future ARG and unfiction creators to learn from. I have several takeaways from the OmenMinecraft project that I believe will be useful for future creators. First, the creator of the Omen Concrete channel did a great job of taking the stereotypical Minecraft creepy story cliché, "there's an entity in my world," and giving it a unique twist. There are dozens of projects that have a protagonist in a world with an entity trying to kill them, but this project stands out because the entity is actually just as scared as the protagonist. Debase doesn't want to hurt Omen. He's just a hungry guy that's been trapped in this world for who knows how long. In general, taking the cliché and turning it on its head, or taking the cliché and looking at a new aspect of it, will make your project stand out. From a pacing standpoint, the videos The Truth and The Hunt do suffer a bit from their length, at 15 minutes each, compared to the other videos of at most 7 minutes. I understand why these videos are so long. The Truth needed to prove that Debase did not exist in other worlds, and The Hunt had to show the trap Omen was making. However, I wonder whether it would have been possible to cut these videos a bit shorter to help retain the interest of the audience. These were the only 2 videos where I felt just a bit bored. My takeaway for future creators is that you should try to balance build-up and payoff, immersing the audience in your world while keeping them engaged with your story. In addition, these 2 videos could have been improved with a bit more exposition from Omen about why he was doing what he was doing. In The Truth, all Omen tells us is that he'll prove that Greg is lying, but then he goes on to build a house with no explanation. Having watched the series 4 or 5 times now, I know that he's trying to replicate the conditions that summoned Debase, but it's confusing for people who've only seen it once and who don't have that explanation. Similarly, Omen doesn't give us any explanation for what he's doing in The Hunt for Debase, and even when we see that he's building a pit trap, he doesn't explain why. Using more exposition to explain what Omen was doing would have helped the audience follow his actions a bit better, and these expositions might also have been good cut points to shorten these videos. I'll conclude with another positive. The jump scare in I Regret Everything followed the jump scare formula perfectly. It slowly builds over the course of the video, with the ambient noise slowly growing louder, at least in my ears. Then the noise cuts out for a moment, swelling the anticipation, and then bam, the jump scare. We're left breathing as heavily as Omen probably is as he flees down the corridor. This scene is a great illustration of my previous point about build-up and payoff. The strong build-up makes the jump scare much more satisfying. The story of OmenMinecraft turns the usual Minecraft ARG narrative on its head. Instead of the entity being malicious, the entity is just as scared as the protagonist is. If you enjoyed Omen's story as much as I did, please check out Omen's channel via the link in the description and let them know what you think. Thank you for watching, and as always, whether it's morning, evening, or afternoon, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you soon. Goodbye! If you're hungry for more ARG analysis content, as hungry as Debase is hungry for pork chops and steak and things, check out this playlist that I have right next to me waving at you. I'm not really good at these transition things. Okay, bye.